Welcome to Draw Process. I'm Ike, page 51 of First Sun and Sword today. Welcome to my world. Being the practice of my art, pursuing my calling, and making comic books. And I just got back from Memphis Comic Expo and got some heavy criticism from a well-established pro, which I'm finding I know is going to be useful, but it has me in a weird headspace approaching this page today. But let's see how I get into it, and I'll share my thoughts along the way.
And here's the page from last week, page 50. Sun jumps in the way. This is the layout. That is the left-hand page. This is the right-hand page. We thumbnailed this last week, so it's not in this video. It was part of the last video, but you see here what I was initially thinking for this. I'm not super happy with how it flows. So here's a retake, Sword and Sun, from a over-the-shoulder shot of King Croc, his kind of silhouette there on the right side, and then Sword and Sun together, and then an over-the-shoulder of Sword talking to Sun. We get Sun's face reaction there, and then a nice symmetrical large panel at the bottom to show Sword and King Croc facing off with Sun stepping away. That's going to be a tricky shot because as Sun is stepping away, depending on where I place the horizon line, he can end up looking very large on the page. He could look bigger than Sword or bigger than King Croc, and that would kind of mess up how imposing I want King Croc to seem, and they're the focus. So, and he's our stand-in. He gives us that emotional connection, that POV. But it's a nice symmetrical layout here. I've redone it now. This is another thumbnail. I decided let's try to get 4 panels in the top, a little more time. So same first 2 panels, but then we'll get a nice shot of Sword's face and then a shot of Sun's face. It'll give me time to write a little more dialogue, get a better emotional beat, like get us connecting with how they're feeling at this moment just before the final face-off. And I had the script up on the page. I don't think I mentioned it, but you could have read it at the bottom. It was very simple, just Sword telling Sun to go. I can't protect you, but I can kill this monster. I wasn't happy with the wording. It was just a placeholder in the script. This is the page of the final setup for the face-off. And now we jump into pencils. So I mentioned in that intro, I recorded that just after Memphis because that's when I drew this page. It's another week after that now that I'm doing this voiceover. At the time, I had norovirus, probably, like a stomach flu. And now I've got a cold. So I just can't win right now. So we are back. Yeah, so as I'm doing these rough pencils, I'm trying to figure out the placement of the elements. They might as well be stick figures or little blobs. It doesn't matter. It's the shapes. It's the layout. Very abstract at this point. And I take a few cracks at it to get it just right. So we have, how much of King Croc do we see? How much of that silhouette? What's needed to show that? And can he frame Sun without overlapping him? I'm trying to use this as an establishing shot in a way. So if I can capture all of Sun and Sword, all of their figure without any overlap on them, it's going to be more effective. And I don't think I don't recall, but I probably didn't completely leave them unobstructed. Like Sword's a little bit behind Sun, but that's the idea of what I'm going for. As I place my elements for the sake of composition, then I figure out the perspective, the background, where the floor is going to be, and so on. And word balloons, yeah. So some of this was figured out in the thumbnail, but I'm trying to create a visual kind of connection between these four panels. That sword is high on the page, top left, and then in this next panel he's going to be a little bit lower on the panel, and then in the next one a little lower. And the word balloons are also going to work at that down and to the right angle too. And even Sun's face is going to kind of do that too. So I think I guess this is another interesting point. We talk a lot about panel composition here, and there's a lot that I question and wonder about. And I hear advice on creating a flow from panel to panel. I'm doing that here, but it's not based on creating a line through the page, an invisible line of that flow. It's just one tool in creating a nice composition, a nice grouping. It's just design. It doesn't have to be a line. It could be a circle. It could be anything. It could be, completely separate. It could just like one shape here, right in the center. It stays in the center each time. Like it wouldn't have to move at an angle. It wouldn't have to anything. So it's probably more useful to just think of it as that line that I'm creating is just for creating a grouping, a relationship from panel to panel that feels like a nice design. Like they fit together and they morph. The negative space, positive space kind of morphs one to the other. Kind of like chords and notes in a song. They actually, you can tell they're in the same key. They actually fit together. So I'm not letting my drawing ability dictate the placement of figures or the perspective or foreshortening or camera angle I have to draw these characters in. I intentionally, for design purposes, I wanted Sun's head that low on the page and swords in exactly the position it's in. I needed them in those positions, and I know how they're standing physically. The rest I just have to figure out. The rest is, okay, based on these positions I've put them in, where is my horizon line? How high is this camera? What's the view on them? And then I have to draw everything else to that. A beginner, mistake for me, something I've learned, is drawing what you can, drawing in a way that you can draw, or or just focusing on drawing the figure first, without focusing on the design, the shape language first, and then drawing around that. So that's why it also helps to do thumbnails, and it helps to do really like sketchy loose pencils to start with. Like that third panel there, just that rectangle for Sword's head. The character acting, now you're starting to see that line, that kind of movement from panel to panel that kind of moves down the page, and the word balloons follow that. But the faces, the character acting, personal taste, it's me communicating what's the feeling of these characters. It's important to me that there is acting. They're not just filler faces that look the same each time, so it is challenging. When I first started, it was definitely challenging to keep faces looking the same, making them look like the same person, panel to panel to panel. And I knew I wasn't that good at it when I was starting comics, but I also didn't want to completely go all in on using reference or using like a character sheet where it's like, these are the expressions, that I can do. Let's just pick one of these, throw it in there. I tried not to go all in on that because I wanted to act through my drawings, like just let my characters their expressions, their movements be what feels right to me. And I knew by doing that it was going to look more incorrect, like it was going to reveal my flaws as an illustrator. But over time, I've just gotten better and better at that. So there's less and less flaws in it. Like it's more accurate. It looks better. It just took time, and I knew that instinctively that this is a path that will just take time, and I'm not going to bail out of it by over correcting and pre-planning those kind of using reference or something. So sometimes that's just how it is. It's going to look worse before it looks better kind of thing. Let's see. Yeah, trying to position these figures. I realized, with King Kroc's size, I can't get his full figure in the shot. His tail's going to go off the page. And how tall he is, that dictates, I want him to fill that panel. So then I'm going to try to draw Sword in relationship to King Croc. That's why I started with Croc. Because that's the measurement for everything else in this panel. And then I'm going to position Sword, try to get his size correct. And then I'll figure out where Sun is. Now, I got ahead of myself here. I'm starting, I thought I knew where the horizon should be in the background, so I start putting it in. But I forgot the third element that's going to be really important is Sun. How tall I want him to be and where I want his shape positioned in this composition is the next most important thing. And then when I get that, then I can put in the background. So I did that out of order. Sometimes I get lucky and it works, but I have a feeling it's not going to. You'll notice with, see, I'm adjusting the background to try to bring the horizon up. Because you'll notice as I drew Sun, I'm trying to draw him like in a really squatted stance because I want to keep his height down and not have him huge on the page, vertically high on the page for the sake of composition. So that's what I'll be struggling with right there. This story is getting close to wrapping up, and I'm going to have to write the next story, and I haven't put too much thought into it. Every now and then I think about possible scenarios and what would be right for these characters, and that does have me working on thinking about writing more. I think it's... I guess like what I think I see an example of in American comics within the last 20 years or less for sure, but is a focus on writing or storytelling in the sense of a few pages. Like if we can have a really good hook, a really good 5 pages, well, that's your pitch. And if you have your first issue and you're trying to get readers, you have that solid first, chunk of pages for the preview, maybe the first issue. And so writing seems to be, to try to get an audience, to try to get attention, that writing seems to be pushed towards brief scenes. The focus on writing seems to be pushed towards that. And then, well, there just seems a lot less focus on and attention on, for me and in the comic, culture, on longer stories. It's kind of like in, with the television boom of series, of a mature television series that were to be as good as movies. There was a shift in the type of storytelling being done from Hollywood movie, hour and a half, 2 hour, to these long form stories. And it's kind of like that. Like what I'm doing is much more in the realm of a long series with this story. It's not brief. It's not a one shot. So, yeah, it just seems a little more foreign to me. And I think about writing advice, I've heard that you can be more structured with how you write. Like follow a structure, like Save the Cat or something. And you fit your story into the structure, and that way it's like solid. But I think my approach is more like, instead of like having a building plan that I follow exactly to get the Eiffel Tower, something really symmetrical and built a certain way. It's more like World of Goo. If you know that reference, a video game where you build towers with these little goo balls. But it's more, you start at the bottom and you start building, and you're trying to keep the tower from toppling over, and you're placing it as you go based on knowledge, and there is some knowledge of structures that are more sound, using some triangles and different structures to keep it more sound so it doesn't topple over. But there's a time limit, there's a setup that you just can't control everything. So you're building it as you go, adjusting. Maybe it leans too far to the right, so you start adding more weight to the left to keep it from falling over, and you just keep the tower going up. And in the end, you get a lot of variety of the shapes of your tower. It's not just one shape. That feels more right to me for long form stories. In some ways, like if when I've thought in the past more about just good writing of a scene, something brief, it does seem like it's more of a rigid structure. Like it's so brief, there's like not that much you can do in that time. But by writing something so long, there's way more possibilities of shapes to the structure. There's way more times that like your voice as a creator, your values, your views, the way you see the world, it's going to leak out, even if you don't think it is, or you're not trying to. There's just too many chances for it to show. And I think that audiences are looking for that. I think they want to see that. Like how I say audience, I guess I should say reader, but I'm thinking in the whole, all mediums right now. But I think they're watching for like, a character to identify with that's having a problem. How are they going to get out of this problem? They're not just looking to be surprised. They're looking for the meaning of life. Like they're looking for overcoming, showing of good and defining good and bad in a new way, hopefully. And so this comes out in all these. It could be a silly story, or just whatever. But it's going to come out in it. And I guess I'm thinking I can trust my gut as I build this story, and I build that leaning tower and just kind of piece it together. I can trust my gut and trust that my choices and values are going to be expressed over time, and that will be a good thing. Like, some people may not like the story. I can't control that. But it will be a story. It will be art. And it'll say something, I hope. So, yeah, I'm thinking about that. The next story will probably be similar in length to this one because it just feels like a good length. You can get like a full story arc and not rush it if you do like 60 pages. 20 pages is just very brief to me. And part of it is the storytelling style that I do, which is maybe more like manga. I like to show a lot more steps to the action and a lot more reaction and stretch that out over panels and pages. And not squeeze like a lot of dialogue in. I don't use captions with like a narrator. That can also kind of push a story along to squeeze more into less pages. So yeah, for me it seems the longer form is best. Now you'll see that I'm going back over my pencils. Doesn't hurt, it's adding a little time, but I'm just finalizing some choices, making a few new choices on expressions and details, shadow placement. So, and I apologize for how much the camera is like wobbling, or maybe my lap board is wobbling. I'm in a new office, new setup here, so something is going on there, and I'll try to like keep that from happening in future videos because hopefully it's not too distracting to see that movement on the camera. Yeah, so there's the first stretch of panels and the big establishing one down here. So I'm using just one color, maybe 5 shades of it. I'm going to separate sun from the focus, like the mid-ground. The focus is sword and King Croc, and sun is more like a silhouette pulled close to the camera. So I'm gonna have him probably in darkness, like a darker shade, and not a whole lot of contrast on him. So typically, like technically, when things are closer to your eye, they have greater contrast, more highlights and dark spots. But I'm gonna, it's not reality, and I'm gonna play with that. So I'm gonna push it towards less contrast so that there's not too much focus on sun, too much attention that gets drawn there by that high contrast. The light sources here are basically behind them. There's other sources on the other wall. So they are all kind of silhouetted. I'm going to add a lot of shadow along the face of the figures, like the side facing us. And yeah, the character acting, exactly how his son's standing. His hands are still bound. He's walking backwards, but he's not taking his eyes off King Croc. He's looking up at King Croc. The way his hands are kind of held up in front of him and together, you get a real sense of his physical presence. How he's feeling, what he's thinking about, like yeah. So that's a big part of it. I think this makes a pretty dramatic statement. So when it comes to storytelling, it's easy, and it happens in other, in film and stuff too. People forget about the physical space. and utilizing it, you could say blocking, like the movements of your figures within that space, how to make the physical environment part of the story, part of the not just that it's not just part of the story, like it adds character to the story, but the visual storytelling, the where you're going to place the camera, how things are unfolding, and the blocking, the placement of figures to tell story. And you could also say just having powerful imagery. There's like, there's certain, sculptures and paintings and things that just stick with people. They have this powerful image. And this is one of those. Like, this is the part of comics that is maybe the hardest, is maybe the easiest to forget, because you can tell the visual story panel by panel. You can have the words, you can have figures, and they're acting, they're moving about, but can you create images that are powerful? And tell the story on another level, like even through the way they move and are positioned. So older movies do that a lot, and if you look at newer movies, there's a lot more of just like talking heads. There's like, medium shots, close-ups, and just like close-up, shot, reverse shot, shot, reverse shot. They just go back and forth between two talking characters, and nothing. They don't do anything. Like, they could be walking around the room while they're talking, towering over someone. Their physical movements could represent something of how they're feeling, and what position they're taking over others, or foreshadowing if they're betraying someone. So that's part of it too. But this panel here is a nice, powerful image. It's very symmetrical. This is one of those, like, we should all want this, our art in our comics to like really attract people, for people to love it. And one of the ways people do that is like really beautiful art, like executed very finely, very nicely, lots of detail, beautiful figures and colors and stuff. And all that can be a lot of time, a lot of work, a lot of effort. And it can pay off when they open that book and they're like, wow, I want this, So there can be a lot of time and energy and work that goes into that. For me, I want to get that wow reaction out of them from things like that panel there, where they open it and they see a very archetypal, like strong image, and they're like, wow, like this is something. This is powerful. These are actual characters in an actual situation. I want to know about this, and so I can do it with simple art and simple lines, and less less perfect art as well. So and that all just goes down to the shapes, the layouts and things, the graphic design. You'll notice the backgrounds, there's angles, to these lines that are the tiles, the stones of the floor and the wall and so on. Those were partly positioned based on what was necessary for the positioning of the characters, like I had talked about earlier. But they also are being considered for their graphic involvement in like the composition and the look of the page. So it's intentional that the grid on the left is at a different angle than on the right. Where I chose for the tile behind sword to end was intentional. To avoid tangents is one part of that. And then the last two panels, the angle of that shadow behind sword, and then the angle of the floor there next to sun. Each of these angles is for following some design principles of like variety and relationship to each other, to a degree. It's like I said, the world of goo. I'm just kind of building that tower based on some knowledge, but it's messy as you go. Big long lines, very annoying to to try to do without a ruler, but I just like I like the hand. I like the hand drawn nature of it. That's part of the style. The voice in the work itself. If thanks to a lot of the, I guess, like digital tools that help people with art, and even things like rulers, thanks to tools that have been employed and techniques, there starts to get like a single visual language that people are used to seeing in comics. And by that, I don't mean like the storytelling panel to panel, but the way that things are drawn can start to be all very similar. And so even, using a ruler to make those lines or not is going to be part of the voice of the author. And so it's partly intentional, why I draw things the way I do, or do the techniques I use. It's intentional to a degree, because I recognize there's certain qualities to it that I can make my own, that can communicate in a certain way to people. And so I need to be aware of that. And then it's also what feels right to me, like in my body, in my artistic sensibilities, what feels right. When I sit and work, how do I like to work? And so I'm really listening to both. What is my body telling me? How do I like to work? Do it that way. And also like looking at my work, what does this mean to people? What voice would this have? And so I'm developing a voice, a style, but it's not something I'm completely controlling and planning. It's more of a process of unfolding, paying attention to both internal and others' view. So yeah, that's always fun, that experience, and it never ends. I think this next page I drew, I'm really looking forward to sharing that. I feel like it's getting even closer to where I'm heading with style and composition. It helps that this scene is so dramatic, so it helps me like put my head in the game of like to make it dramatic, and also that the background is so. At first, I saw it as a challenge to deal with a background that's so flat and has such a grid to it and not clear like shadow areas. But now, especially on this next page, I'm finding it to be a really nice, like easy to work with background, so that I can focus more on composition and realize, oh, it doesn't matter like what's back there. If this was outside in the woods or in a city or wherever, I can do the same thing that I'm figuring out to do here with this scene. So yeah. Well, then, and the environments, I was talking about like blocking for your figures and environments, but also the design of the environments themselves. Like this scene could have taken place anywhere. There's certain things the story dictated that we need, but there's no reason it had to be in this kind of very heavy stone firelit, kind of space. It didn't have to be that way. And then they're in this space, and they're in this space for a lot of pages. This is a long fight. It's a long time to spend in one space. Is it going to get boring to the reader? Like, yeah, was this the right choice? And it's a very static space. You know, it's not. You think of Steven Spielberg fight scenes with lots of movement, very active environments. Raiders of the Lost Ark with the fist fight and stuff around the airplane. Always moving parts that in the environment that add to the drama, the excitement. So, but I chose a real static one, and that I could have done anything. I think it was a decent choice. In this case, though, because it adds to the being trapped in this tomb with a giant crocodile. It adds to the claustrophobia and the trapped feeling and the and stepping into another world from where they were. So I think it serves pretty well for the story to do it in this manner, but it could have been done in any other way. And it's worth considering. And I hope to do that in the next story, be considering very much so the environments. It could be in any kind of village, a city, any environment. So that's it for this week. Finished page right there. I chose to have no word balloons in that last panel so that it just stands as an even stronger panel. I've talked before, I think on here, that sometimes I don't like to have any panels with no word balloons because sometimes the eye will just skip over them. So I don't like to go with no word balloons on a page, but I don't like too many either. And it's like some balance you try to find. This felt right to me because this was not only like balance in some broad sense, but like after having word balloons in every panel leading up to a moment and then having a strong, symmetrical composition filling the page, it's like you can go wordless. And on the next page, I chose also to go completely wordless after so much talking during this fight, like up to this moment. And we're reaching like a climactic moment. I realized I could go with 0 word balloons for this moment because I've built up the attention and interest to this moment. It would almost be like in a movie if you have all this like epic music playing and then it's like at that moment, that standoff, and then it goes silent. And you just see what happens in silence, let's say. So that's like a next level kind of thinking because it has to do with the dynamics through from page to page through a story. Anyways, that's it for this week. Be the practice of your art. Encourage others to do the same. See you next week.